Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's our first episode in the new year. It's episode 460. I'm really pleased, got a really great guest, a special guest, somebody who even read his books or book about WordPress. That's Brad Williams, CEO and co-founder of WebDevStudios. Thanks, Brad, for coming on. And can you give our listeners and viewers a quick intro about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. Like you said, I'm Brad Williams, CEO, co-founder of WebDevStudios. We're a 100% WordPress design and development agency. One of the older ones in the space. We're actually going into our 12th year this year, which is pretty amazing. We started in 2008 officially, so it's been a really, really fun ride. I've also co-authored a number of WordPress development books, like you mentioned, the Professional WordPress series by Rox and Wiley, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. And I love WordPress. I've been very involved in all the, I'm out in Philadelphia. I started the WordPress Philadelphia meetup group. Actually will be 10 years this year. So in a few months, we'll be celebrating our 10-year anniversary. Organized the first 5 WordCamp Phillies, or co-organized the first 2 WordCamp US events that were in Philadelphia. Was involved in WordSesh and just a number of stuff. I'm really a big fan of WordPress, open source, and everything that involves with it, especially the community. So
that's great, Brad. Unfortunately, the better looking half of our Adrian couldn't join us, so you just got me, listeners and viewers. Before we go into the main part of the show, I just want to mention a couple of our sponsors. Our main sponsor, as you should know, is Kinsta Hosting, and Kinsta only specialise in WordPress hosting. We host the WP-Tonic website with them. We've been with them for the past couple of years. They've decided to be our main sponsor again in 2020, which is fantastic news. They're just fantastic hosting providers if you're looking for real quality WordPress hosting. If you've got a WooCommerce site, a membership site, you need better quality hosting, and that's what you get with Kinsta. They provide it through Google Cloud, but what you get is fantastic interface, and the main thing is you get superb 24/7 support for yourself or for your clients. So if that sounds interesting, go over to Kinsta, have a look at their products, buy one of them, and also tell them, and this is the important thing, tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show. Our second sponsor is a new sponsor, and that is from one of my friends that comes on the Round Table show, Spencer Forum, and him and his crew have launched a fantastic product called Launch Flows. And basically, what it does, if you've been using cart flows, and I think you should, it put cart flows on steroids. It enables you to do some amazing stuff. So if that's interesting for yourself or for your clients, go over to launchflows.com, have a look at what they're offering, and maybe buy it. So on to the main part of the interview. Got a bit of a frog in my throat. So, Brad, let's go to the main part of the show. So you're in the higher end kind of web development area, agency area. Do you think you still have a lot of problem explaining why you should use WordPress when you're looking at these bigger projects and these bigger clients?
I mean, if you look back, we've been doing this for 12 years now. So certainly in the beginning, first 4 or 5 years, it was a lot of kind of selling people on WordPress and why they should use WordPress. I think now WordPress is so popular and so widely adopted, it kind of speaks for itself. Now, when you do get up into the enterprise space, there is a lot of competition from, Adobe and Sitecore and some others that have massive, marketing and sales budgets and teams, and they're, right there pushing their products as you would expect. So I think there is more of a selling aspect in that front, just to explain why something like WordPress and open source is ultimately going to be a better solution in the enterprise space or for that particular client. But by and large, I mean, WordPress really sells itself. People that seek us out, they know what we do. They know we specialize in WordPress, and they're looking for agencies for that very reason. So we don't have to sell WordPress as much as we need to sell ourselves to them.
All right, that's great news. So I noticed you also you and your team, you know, you write a lot, you publish a lot, you do a lot of content marketing. Has that also been a decision that you pursued over the past few years, and has it really benefited the company?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because I'm really proud of the content we produce on our blog, and I have been for a long time. The content on our blog and the content we put out to the public, we've actually been doing it for quite a while, and it's been, you know, there's a lot of reasons why. Obviously, marketing is a big component of that. Being able to write about not just about what we're doing as a company, but being able to write about, you know, maybe different technologies we're experimenting with or playing with, or different solutions we put together for clients in unique and interesting ways, or technologies or services we're using or really like and want to promote. So obviously there's the marketing aspect of that, right? Like, it's getting our name out there as thought leaders. It's keeping our name out there with fresh content. It's certainly great for search engines and traffic. But there's a lot of other wins beyond that. You know, it's a great outlet for our team. Again, our developers take a break from the grind of, you know, writing code and hitting, you know, deadlines for clients, and maybe sit down and write an article about Gatsby and experiment with it a little bit, and why people should, you know, look at something like Gatsby and how it could benefit them. So it's a nice break for them. It's also a great way, in my opinion, of giving back, you know, because we're sharing knowledge, you know, with the community, whether it's WordPress specific or not. You know, some of the posts we're writing about aren't just necessarily WordPress specific. It's more just generic kind of development topics. So it's a great way to give back, right? To help people out there with things that we've learned, or some code examples, or to get someone started on a new technology or new topic. You know, so it's always been a big part of what we do. We like to, you know, allow our team time to write those posts. It's a good thing to do if there's gaps in between, you know, client work. It's a good downtime, you know, process to do. So it's, we have seen a lot of benefit from it. You know, it just, at the very least, it puts us out there as thought leaders, and that we really are passionate and truly enjoy what we're doing. And, you know, I love the content that we produce. We have an amazing team. Laura over on our marketing specialist helps head that up from the editorial front. And she helps kind of help work with the team of engineers on topics, and help, you know, basically says, like, get the meat in there, and I can help with the readability of it, because obviously getting the facts on paper is one thing, but getting it in a way that's easy to read and like flows well is something that can take a little bit of more work. So it's fun to do. We enjoy doing it. We'll continue to do it because it ultimately does benefit us in a number of ways.
That's great. On a sideline, where do you think the tavern's going? Because don't get me wrong, I love Justin. I think he's one of the most generous and upfront people in the WordPress community. But just recently, you know, obviously I think his official title is editor, but I'm a little bit confused where they're taking the tavern. Where would you like the tavern to go if you were personally had some control over it? Where do you think its focus should be?
Yeah, the tavern, WP Tavern is interesting, right? I've been around since pre-tavern, right? Well, you know, I met Jeffro online, Jeff Chandler, and prior to him launching the tavern, I remember when he came up with the idea of what he wanted to do, you know, bouncing it off of me, and we were kind of, you know, I was giving him some ideas and thoughts around it. This is very early on. Like, this is before I even started WebDevStudios. You know, this is like 2006 or 7 timeframe. So I've been there from the beginning, and I've seen the kind of different, you know, the evolution of the tavern from where it started, and kind of the different ups and downs it's had over the years. You know, I think one of the challenges the tavern's probably always going to have is the fact that it's, you know, ultimately it's owned by Matt Mullenweg. Now I haven't seen any kind of bias.
No, I haven't
Because of that.
either, really, have I? You know, I've been
Yeah.
surprised in how the stuff that they've been able to cover, really.
Yeah, and they've brought up, you know, they've published some controversial stuff, and I think if he did have his hands in it, he probably wouldn't have allowed that. So I think that's good, right? We want to have kind of an unbiased approach to news in the WordPress space. I think there's always going to be room for something like the tavern, of that, you know, that news source that is laser focused on WordPress. It's definitely grown up, you know, when you know, Jeff launched it, and for the first however many years, it was very much just kind of Jeff's take and approach on, you know, plugins and products and the direction of WordPress and just kind of his thoughts. And now it feels more like an official kind of, publication where there's editorial and, the topics are clearly, I'm sure, worked on together as a group. So where it's going from now, I don't know. I think Justin's a great writer, and I really like some of the more technical stuff he's been putting out, which I think has been kind of lacking over the years. So having someone like Justin with his technical chops, being able to write, and speak to that, I think is awesome. But I guess we'll see, because it is in a bit of a transition now with Jeff, no longer there.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe
Justin's on board,
maybe I'm being a little bit harsh. I just think it's the new design and some of the articles, but it's still early days.
Design is definitely a version 1. it's a bit jarring, right? Like, we're used to the tavern, the wood grain, the tavern you would expect it to feel like, and now it's just kind of generic, right? But I think it was, to his point of the post, it was like just to get it migrated into the new setup and the new theme, and that way they can iterate on it a little bit quicker. So I would expect it to get a little bit better over time.
Now, another area I seek some insight from you is you get a lot of freelancers that are looking to join an agency like yours, and they can suffer rapidly burnout. Now, would you agree with that? And secondly, how do you deal with bringing in new talent and seeing that? Because it is a bit different if you're kind of freelancing and you join something like your agency, isn't it? How do you deal with the difference in culture and the requirements?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We hire a lot of freelancers. I generally like hiring freelancers because they not only have assuming they have the technical capabilities that we need, but they also have the ability to work well with clients, right? Or else they wouldn't be successful at freelancing. And the majority of the time when a freelancer is looking to join an agency like ours, it's really because they want to get back to what they love doing, right? Which is building, awesome WordPress websites. Whether it's the design, the front and the back, and whatever that means to them and their skills, they want to get back to what they're doing. And the challenge of being a freelancer is, it's the challenge of running a business. It is the non-fun stuff of contracts and negotiations and sales and getting paid and all that stuff that is not not glamorous, but it's a component of running your own business. And a freelancer is no different than an agency. It's just one person versus a group of people. So when a freelancer joins our team, obviously we offload all that stuff. We get them back to doing what they love, which is writing code, or designing, or whatever that looks like. So we have, people on our, staff members dedicated to the other piece. Like a lot of what I do is on the contractual side of things, in the sales side. So, and again, that's the kind of non-glamorous part, but it's super important for a company to be successful. So I think that's a lot of the reason, when freelancers looking to join a company like ours, that's usually one of the number one things they bring up is they're just tired of all the other stuff that comes with having your own company. And I get it. It can be exhausting, sometimes. So the thing about us is we're a team, so we can work together. We can support each other, in the ups and the downs. So, generally speaking, when we bring in a freelancer, they generally fit in pretty well. I think they're so excited to get back to what they love doing that, there's always a lot of energy when new team members join, for them and for us. It's bringing in new ideas, fresh ideas, someone that's really excited to be here and try something different. And ultimately it's contagious, right? Like when people are really motivated and positive and just super excited, that's contagious, and it's good, good to bring in some fresh blood on occasion.
Right. Yeah. So I get the impression that you're saying, and also the last bit, about your own culture is like bringing in freelancers. You haven't observed many negatives about the onboarding experience.
No, I mean, if we look at the negative side of it, one area that you definitely have to focus on is just making sure that they're going to fit into the way you work, right? Your processes, your tools. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily a really big negative, but some people come in and they've done things a certain way for however many years and they've worked on their own. So now it's one kind of, understanding our processes, how we need to work, with our clients, how we work internally together. how we work with code management, all that stuff, our process of updating clients and screenshots and all that, time tracking, which is one that everybody hates, but it's a necessary evil. So that type of stuff is really where the learning curve is at. It's not necessarily what they're building. It's working within the processes that we've established, because they're there for a reason. They're there because they work. So that's an area that we always make sure we pay close attention to when we onboard. And that's really just anybody, right? Whether they're a freelancer or somebody coming from another agency or whatever, everybody works a little bit differently. And so it's just making sure they get comfortable with how we work.
That's great. We're going to go for our breaks, folks. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Brad's new revised book, and also what he sees maybe as the trends in WordPress in the coming year. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. Adrian's not with me, the good-looking one, the intelligent host, but you just had to deal with me, Mr. Grumpy Englishman. But there we go. I think Brad's handling me quite well, actually. So, Brad, like I said in our pre-show chat, I think your book was one of the second or third book I bought when I was an active WordPress developer. Awesome. So you decided to do a revision. Why did you decide that? And secondly, what are some of the key bits that you're proud about in the revised book?
Yeah, so the book we're updating is this book, which is Professional WordPress Plugin Development. So this was the first edition, the only edition, and this was released in 2011. So, and we actually did the majority of the writing in 2010. So it's, about 9-10 years old. And in the world of open source, that's an eternity. That is, just in the world of technology, that's like night and day, right? So this is a book that was always, kind of close to my heart. The first book I ever wrote was Professional WordPress, which is kind of WordPress development in general. So there was,
that was the second book I bought.
Oh, okay. That's great. And that one's awesome. We did 3 editions of that one to date. But they covered a lot more than just plugins. There's themes and there's a lot of other development stuff that we dug into. Now, a lot of it relates to plugins, but this book is, 400 plus pages of plugin specific development. And, by and large, it's one of the highest rated, WordPress development books on Amazon, and has been and still is today, 8-9 years later. I get a lot of questions. Every WordCamp I go to, people are asking me like when we're going to update this. And it's one I've been trying to get push to make this happen. Honestly, it's been probably 3 or 4 years now. So I'm really excited that it's becoming a reality. So it's definitely going to be out this year. I'm working with Justin Tadlock again, who we talked about a little bit earlier. And he co-authored the first book. And then we also brought in John James Jacoby, Triple J, as many people know him, to help round out the group of co-authors.
Another great guy, another great developer, been on my round table show multiple times.
Brilliant mind. And that's the first edition. One of the goals is I wanted to bring in the best of the best, right, to help me write this book. And I feel like we've done that again. So as you can imagine, 8-9 years later, being a second edition, you start with the first edition and then you go through and update what needs to be updated. Well, if the second edition is only a year or two later, there's not as much to update. But when it's 8 or 9 years later, it's basically a brand new book because everything is getting updated, including bringing a lot of the things that just didn't exist back then, like the obvious big topics. And we have full chapters dedicated, or the REST API, which didn't exist back then, and Gutenberg and the block editor, which certainly didn't exist back then. So, and there's a lot of other features that didn't exist, 8-9 years ago. So, so I'm really excited. We're right there at the finish line with getting the first draft done. It's actually the due date is next week. And then there'll be a period of, going through the final process of edits and things like that. So it should be out in the next few months. Very excited about it. I'll be talking a lot more about it, on Twitter and on social. So if you follow #PluginDevBook, you'll see the 3 of us chatting about it. And we're excited to get it out there.
So who is the book aimed at? Who is its target audience? You feel its target audience then?
So it's published under ROX, which is WROX, which is a division of Wiley, and ROX is the programmer to programmer side, and that's where the term professional comes from, right? So this book is written for developers. It's written for programmers. Now, it doesn't mean on page 1 we're diving into these ultra advanced concepts of development, but it does get pretty technical. So truly, this book is for anyone that's ever wanted to build a plugin in WordPress will understand how to do that, really within the first couple chapters. It's also for anyone that really wants to elevate their game, right? So if you're already building for WordPress, whether it's plugins or whatever, this book will ultimately help you level up, because we do dig into some pretty heavy topics. Gutenberg, is a pretty heavy topic. There's a lot more JavaScript in this book, as you can imagine, than there was, 8-9 years ago when everything was just using jQuery and even pretty minimal at that. Where now, React and JavaScript are big components of WordPress, and specifically the Gutenberg editor. So that we do a pretty deep dive into that. So I also like it because we've written it in a way where you don't have to read it front. You can read it front to back, certainly, but you don't have to. Like I think it's a good reference. I still use it, Maybe you forget how to add, how to work with the settings API. You can just go right to the settings API section, get what you need, and away you go, or maybe you forget how to work with, how to add a menu or sub menu, or, how to position the menu, or, it's a way you can kind of quickly reference and refresh on how to do specific things within WordPress. So it's a well-rounded book. And I think anyone that's working in WordPress development, I think is going to get something out of it.
I've been listening to a few podcasts. Some murmurings that, especially if you're publishing it to the directory, the actual process of getting it in a plugin is, some of the technologies are a bit clunky now, compared to GitHub. And some people choose just to publish their plugin to GitHub, don't they? And because they just find it a lot easier. Do you think this whole environment needs revisioning and modernizing a bit?
Yes, it does. I mean, I understand why it's such a massive undertaking, because you think about it, there's 50,000 plus plugins in the WordPress.org plugin directory. There's however many themes. It's all powered by SVN in terms of, how they're pushing code, how those releases are pushing or pulling, into the dashboards for updates and stuff. So to redo that, it would be a massive undertaking and a huge investment, right? So I get why I get that it's a challenge, but I do think it is, it's a hurdle. I mean, when you talk to developers these days and ask how many are familiar with SVN, there's not that many.
Get blank. I would imagine you get quite a few blank looks.
Yeah. So, like you said, a lot of people release on GitHub. Now, there are some clever ways that you can manage your code on GitHub and, push that through SVN to WordPress.org. So there's some code and some scripts and tutorials out there to make that a little bit easier. But ultimately, you do kind of need to know if you want to get it in WordPress.org, which if you want to get the right amount of visibility on it, that's really where it needs to be, so that people can find it through their WordPress dashboard. That's where it needs to be. So I do hope that they make that switch at some point, but I haven't heard anything about that happening anytime soon.
Yeah, this is why I regret my Adrian couldn't join us, actually, because he's an active plugin developer with his own plugin company. So I was hoping he was going to push it. But I don't think I'm doing too bad a job, am I? So
yeah, you're doing great.
Right. When I got into programming, it was through action scripting with Flash, basically. And then I got into JavaScript. And I remember I bought one of those Rocks books on JavaScript. This is when there was like 4 different DOMs. And you literally had to program for 4 different... And I always wanted to shoot myself. I had this project. And I really didn't know what I was doing. And I had a deadline, and it expanded into JavaScript, and I was hoping this book, and in the end I had to call the friends and favors in, and in the end we got the project done, but it was a nightmare. But people should be so thankful that they're not having to write JavaScript for 4 separate DOMs, shouldn't they?
Times have changed for the better, I think.
These new young girls and boys don't know what they're missing, do they?
Yeah, it was a different world back then. You know, to think how far it's come. Or Flash, you know, what's interesting about Flash is if you know you remember, Flash was such a dominant
Yeah,
technology. You know, what early
yeah.
2000s, mid 2000s.
It really was,
And like
wasn't it?
every site was like, you have to be on Flash. It has to be like, you know, almost like a movie experience of some sort. And it was like 90% of the internet, it felt like. And then, you know, once search really took off and Google specifically kind of said, well, if you're using Flash, we won't be able to index you or won't know what you're doing on your website. And that killed it like quickly.
Well, I think the two things that killed it really was that, and also, you know, the iPhone.
Yeah,
You
the
know, when
iPhone.
that appeared and you couldn't run Flash on that, that was the kind of finishing moment, wasn't it?
Yep.
When the knife was stuck right in the heart of
Yeah, it is
Flash,
still
wasn't it?
out there. I mean, I have a 4-year-old, and you know, I find little toddler games and stuff that you can play online, and a lot of them are Flash. And I always have to like do the song and dance to get Flash to work in Chrome. I think they're ultimately removing it this year, anyways, completely. I'm sure there'll be a way to re-enable it, but it's still out there. It's just certainly not what it used to be, which is a good thing, I think.
I think we're going to wrap up the podcast part of the show. Hopefully, Brad's going to, you can stay on for another 10 minutes kind of for our
Sure.
bonus content. Can you, Brad? You can
Absolutely.
tolerate me for another 10 minutes. I think I'm only teasing him. And we're going to be discussing some of his thoughts about the future of WordPress, where he thinks it's going. You know, he's been part of the WordPress community for a long time, a great member. So, Brad, how can people find out more about you, your company, and what you're up to?
Yeah, so company is WebDevStudios.com. I'm Williams BA on Twitter. I'm Williams BA on most platforms. Look for WebDevStudios on most platforms. Check out our blog. You know, we also push that out to Twitter and some other places, but you can go subscribe if you want to get those posts. But again, it's some really awesome content. And I think you'll benefit from it. And keep an eye out for Professional WordPress Plugin Development 2nd edition, which will be out hopefully in a few months. I'll be tweeting about that, obviously, a lot. So follow me on Twitter, and you'll get all those good updates.
Oh, thanks, Brad. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been a
Yeah,
blast.
thanks for
Hopefully
having me.
you will return at some stage. We'll be back next week with another great guest, another offering great insight into WordPress e-learning or how to run online business in general. We'll be back next week, folks. See you soon. Bye. So, Brad, so the past 18 months, to say that they have been interesting in the WordPress space would be an understatement.
Nice way of putting it.
It is, isn't it? Because I've been part, you know, obviously running a podcast. Obviously, it's a bit like running something like the Tavern. You're in the entertainment business, so controversial elements are interesting. In some ways, things have died down a little bit, but like I was listening to the last episode of the Matt Report for Matt Medeiros, who comes on my round table show reasonably often. He still is very pessimistic about what Automatic are really up to with and the final outcome. How do you, have you put any thought where you think all this is going?
Yeah, I know Matt well. We do a show together. And I know he is.
I love the guy. You know, it's one of the first podcasts I listened to. Decided to become a podcaster myself.
Yeah.
I just think sometimes he's pushing it. I don't think they have got such a detailed plan that he thinks they have.
I mean, Matt's favorite hat is his tinfoil hat, right? He loves the he loves the conspiracy theories of it, you know. And I think some areas he's pretty spot on. Others are a little bit maybe more out there. You know, the thing is that we have to remember is Automatic is a company, right? Like Automatic wants to make money. Automatic has a lot of funding and, you know, investors that they need to, again, make money for, right? So now Automatic has also done a ton for WordPress in the open source space as well. So there's always this kind of blurred line of, you know, where does Automatic's contribution to the open source component of WordPress end and the business begin and end, you know what I mean? There's this blurriness that it will always be there. Specifically on the open source side, I think around Jetpack, which, you know, Matt likes to talk about, where it's basically become this behemoth of a plugin, and it's, you know, almost advertised in a way that if you want to truly experience WordPress the best way possible, like you have
Can
to
I,
run
can I,
Jetpack.
can I just say
Right?
something to you there, Brad? I don't really want to, well, part of me does want to say this because when I haven't been to many WordCamps for the past 18 months. I've just been too busy, really. But when I was going to WordCamps, the Jetpack people are such nice people. You know, they're such really very nice people. But I just think Jetpack's a load of shit, really. To be quite truthful. That's why I can't see where Matt's coming from, because I think if that's their Trojan horse, they've got a bit of a problem. Because I just think it's a total piece of crap.
There's definitely strong thoughts on it. It's evolved so much over the years that I feel like you either love it or hate it, or you're just indifferent and you don't know and you don't care. So it's, Jetpack people are great, but you look at something like Jetpack,
that's a very diplomatic answer.
Diplomatic kind of guy. Like, if you think about it, when Jetpack first came out, they were like a sponsor of every WordCamp for years before they ever had any kind of a paid anything, right? So it was like this free plugin, and they were advertising it at all these WordCamps, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this.
Yeah.
That right there tells me everything I need to know about what the goals of Jetpack were. It was first to get market share, to be installed on every possible WordPress site. They've made deals with like hosting companies, so it's automatically there when somebody does an install of WordPress, things like that. So they just want it to be there. And once they have that mass adoption, which they do now, they started to push out the premium stuff, right? Like, hey, you can upgrade and do the backup service, or you can upgrade and do this, or upgrade and do that. And that's not far off. Like now with Gutenberg and the block editor and everything, like the next big market that we're already starting to see is blocks, right? Selling blocks.
Yeah.
And the idea of, hey, you're writing a post in Gutenberg, and it's like, hey, there's this little star thing or something flashing saying, hey, you could get this premium block from Jetpack for 99 cents. Do you want it? Click here, Sure. Yeah, I want that premium block because it looks super cool. Maybe it shows all my Instagram post or something in a really interesting way or whatever. Like that's completely, feasible and absolutely what's going to happen. There are already companies out there selling blocks as a premium, which is fine. It's a whole new market, right? So, but Jetpack is there, and they already have a payment component hooked in. It's all tied to your WordPress.com account. So that's coming for sure. So I think that's where you get into that kind of gray area of,
I think
is it for open source, a better experience with WordPress, or is it just to make money? Is it a little bit of both? Like, it's just, it's an interesting topic because there's no right answer.
Well, it is messy, isn't it? And I think the messiness in some suits Matt really. I think it suits him that it's a little bit messy. But the other thing is, I think all this and all this Gutenberg, I think the actual running of the project, I think Matt deciding to be the project manager was a bad mistake. I never understood his decision to do that unless it got to a stage where it looked like it was going to totally fail and he had to take it over. I always felt that was a bit of a mistake. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I think a lot of people got threatened to it, and it's not really because of Gutenberg. It's just that I think the whole web development design area has changed dramatically over the past 18 months through things like Squarespace, Wix, and through page builders like Elementor and Beaver Builder. Is that like 5 or 6 years ago, you bought a theme and you could alter a bit, but then if you wanted to go any stage further, either you started becoming a kind of amateur developer yourself, and you spent a load of time reading books and posts, right? Or you hired a developer to help you do more changes. Now with technology, you don't have to employ a developer so much. You can do if you wish to. So, but I see it as kind of changing more like the car industry, the car maintenance industry. There's a group of people, A, because they don't have the money, and B, they like doing it, that like do maintenance to their own car. where other people, you know, they would never dream of doing any maintenance to the car. They wouldn't, like me, I've got no interest in doing maintenance to my car. I take it to the garage, and they do the work for me, right? So I see it as a more of that kind of setup. Am I rambling, or is there any truth in?
I know, I definitely get it. I mean, I like page builders. I think, you know, we use Beaver Builder for some things, for some clients even. And I think it's all about understanding the tool and if it's the right tool for the job. Like I always, you know, preach that internally, like we're not going to use a feature or a tool or a plugin or a theme or a framework just because that's what, you know, everybody says we should do. Right. And that's exactly how we approach Gutenberg. I'm like, I'm not going to force Gutenberg on our clients unless that's the right solution for that client to hit their goals. And so what I tell people is when you're looking at whether you want to use a page builder or a theme or something custom, like really sit down and look at your goals and figure out what you want to do. Page builders are awesome. I think the challenge I have with page builders is you still have to have a design eye to make it look nice, right? Like we give someone too much control. Like I'm not a designer. I'm a zeros and one, you know, kind of guy. I write code. I can't make things look that pretty. I just have never had that eye. So Beaver Builder, if I were going to start with the blank Beaver Builder site, it would be horrendous because I just can't, even tinkering with it, I can't get it to look really nice. You know, that's just not what I do. And I think a lot of people are probably in the same boat, right? Because it does take a special skill to have that eye, to know what looks good, to know it's going to work for your users.
Well, that's probably where the kind of bread and butter developer, they tended to work with a designer, a local designer, local graphic designer,
right?
But that market has definitely shrunk because the graphic designer wants to make more profit. They just get a page builder and then they might get a developer in to finish off a couple of requirements that they aren't technically capable of doing. But and I think a lot of regional local design houses, now I knew a couple that I used to work with, and they used to buy themes off Theme Forest, and they were a little bit wicked. They kind of didn't tell the client where they were getting it from, and I used to have to go in and clean the mess up. And there's a lot of, you know, I know you wouldn't do, and your studio wouldn't even dream of doing that, but there was a lot of shenanigans going on, wasn't there? Still is, probably to some degree.
There still is. I mean, you know, you still see it, and you know, and maybe depending on the client, maybe that's fine. Like to take an off-the-shelf theme and say, "Hey, look what I made for you." If they're really happy with it, and again, it hits their goals, then what's wrong with that? You know, and even they should be transparent and say, "Oh, well, let's work together and find a nice theme that looks the way you want it to look. We can make some adjustments, but it kind of has that look and feel that fits your business or whatever it is you're building." There's nothing wrong with that. That's what we used to, like you said, that's what we used to always do back in the day when the premium theme world exploded. Everybody was just taking premium themes and running with it. And
well, that's what I do that in my own business, Brad. You know, I offer an option of semi-custom where we take an Astra. We're big into Astra. So we've got the Astra and then a starter theme, and then we will customize 6 pages to a high level, and we do mock-ups, and that's a package at a set price. And then if you want a full custom site, it will be based on Astra again. But it'll be a full custom, and that's at a different price.
Right. That's great, because on the small business side of the house, they're not going to have big budgets. They don't have $50,000 to put towards their website, generally speaking, right? And even $5,000 on a small business is a big expense. Like I don't take for granted when, you know, someone comes to us and says they have $5,000 and they want to redo their website. Like that's a lot of money, you know, for an individual or a small business, that's a lot of money. You know, and we work with big companies that are, you know, we're doing 6-figure websites for, and that's a lot of money, right? Yeah. Like, so, it's all about just accomplishing their goals, and that $5,000 website to them is the most important thing in the world, and they're putting a lot of money into it for them. So find whatever's going to help them rather than build something from scratch and it only gets part of the way. Like start with something like Astra. It's a great framework. You know, and that way you can really maximize their dollar and give them an amazing website for that $5,000, you know.
I think we've come to the end of this interview. We finished at a bright point, not one of my gloomy ones. Brad, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Hopefully,
thanks for having me. I'm glad I made it before episode 500.
Yeah, I'm getting close. Yeah,
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I love podcasts. I've met so many interesting people and had so many great conversations like with you, Brad. And it's great to meet new people. And a lot of them have become my personal friends, Brad. So it's a great...
Great.
If they appreciate my English humour, that is. Sometimes... All right, we're going to wrap it up, folks. We'll be back next week and hopefully with my co-host as well. We'll be back soon, folks. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.